Staying strong.
Well, the Brewers and Dodgers are going to face off again tonight at American Family Field. LA has taken the first two games, and the Brewers have lost 3 straight overall. Frankie Montas going to be on the mound for the Crew. Dodgers send Walker Buehler. First pitch is at 7:10. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Pritt.
Hit well down the left field line. That ball is deep. That ball is gone. An upper deck home run just inside the foul pole, and Will Smith makes it 1-0 Dodgers with a 2-out solo home run. 2 down and back to Ohtani.
Oh, my word. Goodbye in the good land. Second deck for Ohtani. Second home run of the game. First pitch swinging high in the air. Right field. A home run in his homecoming.
Oh, Lux just crushed it. Swung on, belted down the left field line. That ball is going off the pole for a home run.
Second 2-run homer of the inning for the Dodgers. 9th of the season for Pages.
First time in Colin Ray's career that he has allowed 4 homers in an appearance.
Every mistake we made, they took advantage of it. They had some really good bats. Even with 2 strikes, they seemed to hit the ball pretty hard. So they definitely hit those mistakes and took advantage of it.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's just a depressing piece of audio from Colin Ray. That's from the clubhouse last night after he gave up 4 home runs and the Dodgers. What was the final score? 7 to what? Oh, 7-2. So William Contreras' 2-run homer. That was the only runs that they scored. Or was it William Contreras' 2-run homer? Or did he hit a solo shot? You know what? I don't care. It's a depressing piece of audio from Colin Ray either way. It made me think of, and if you haven't seen this latest season of House of the Dragon, this doesn't really spoil anything that crazy, but I guess if you're waiting to watch it and you want to hear nothing, just turn this part of the show down. It reminds me of Sir Kristen Cole after the Battle of Rook's Rest, because all of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, Sir Kristen Cole is like, he's pushing his chest out. He's ascended to, again, I don't want to spoil, a certain rank. He is having relations with certain people. He's marching his army to certain places and having certain successes. Things are going well. And then he fights one battle that has a couple dragons. And from that point on, he's like, what does it even matter if we live or die? We're just tiny, worthless people walking around on this rock waiting to die. It's like, Jesus, what happened to you? Well, he's in a battle that had a couple dragons. What happened to you, Colin Ray? Everyone's gassing you up. Jack Stern writing feature pieces about you. Radio hosts like me building entire segments around how you're so good as a pitcher and how you're only getting better this year. What happened to you? Oh, you pitched against the Dodgers. Okay. Makes sense. I would probably sound that way too if I was Colin Ray after last night's game. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. You're having an excellent day. Thank you for being here. You can follow me on Twitter at Wisco Grant. You can text and call the show. We'll open up the phone lines here in just a little bit. 608-321-1670. I want to talk lots of Packers tonight. We have a little audio from Jordan Love. I'm excited to play you. Couple of different conversations that we can have based on certain comments made by Jordan Love. We'll get to that whenever we run out of Brewers gas, right? Whenever it seems like we've adequately been miserable about last night's game, and when we've had enough negativity towards tonight's game, when we've had our fill, and when it seems like we're ready to move on, we'll hear from Jordan Love. Jesse Temple will join us in the second hour of the show. Jesse going to be joining our network all throughout Badger football season this year. We're really lucky to have him. He'll be on Bill's show tomorrow. I don't know when he's doing Hits with Ebo. I'll have to ask him, but if you are a Jesse Temple groupie, I'll get that information to you at some point, but he's going to be joining all of our shows across our network weekly throughout the season. He is outstanding. So you'll hear that conversation in the second hour of the show. I also want to play for you a comment from AJ Dillon, a little interview that he did with a Green Bay television station. And I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head. I know my lacrosse television stations really well. I know my Eau Claire television stations really well. I kind of know Madison and I know Milwaukee. Fox Valley, I put my hands up. I've never lived up there. I've been there a small handful of times, but I don't know the TV stations. I don't know the highways as well as I'd like to, although I'm working on it. But when we get to the A.J. Dillon audio, I'll make sure to be able to tell you who did the interview, which television station it came from, so if you want to go watch it. But A.J. Dillon, not happy with Packers fans. And I think what he said was fair. I think it was fine. We can react and maybe you can draw a different conclusion. And I'm interested to hear that later on in the show. We'll get to that at some point. Again, the phone number, if you don't have it, text the show, call the show. We'll take some calls here in a little bit. 608-321-1670. Started yesterday's show talking about how much I absolutely hate the Los Angeles Dodgers. And my mom, my entire life, has always said, Grant, hate is a strong word. And I don't think that's, by the way, I'm not saying that my mom created that saying. That's a common phrase. I'm sure a lot of people say it. But my mom growing up, I say, Mom, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this person. Well, Grant, hate is a strong word. And I'd always say, well, Mom, that's a good point. Maybe I don't hate that person. Maybe I don't hate that thing. Hate's a strong word. I wish it was a stronger word today. I don't know that hate adequately describes how I feel about the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Colin Ray was supposed to be the best of us. He's supposed to be the best guy that we have. We've given up on the idea of Freddie Peralta as an ace. And I guess Tobias Myers is right there. But no matter if you think Tobias Myers is the ace or Freddie Peralta is the ace, forget who you think is the ace by name. I think, was it Cone Roller yesterday? Or I don't remember who said it. One of our callers said that Colin Ray is an ace in name only. And I think he's even losing that. I think if you were to do a flash poll of Brewers fans, we have to play a playoff game tonight. All things are equal. Every arm is rested and ready to go. Who do you want on the hill? I'm sure most Brewers fans would have said Colin Ray. Some might have said Tobias Myers, and there might have been a couple who say Freddie Peralta, and I still don't know that that's the worst take in the world. You could convince me that Freddie Peralta is still the guy that we want to roll with. I might try to convince myself that maybe Wade Miley. Can we give him a shot in the arm, literally, of something so he can pitch once? I don't know. My point, I think most Brewers fans, when given a choice right now, trust Colin Ray most on the mound as a starter over everybody else. At this point, I think most of us believe he's the best of us. He's the best guy that we have. And even if you don't believe he's an ace, even if you don't think he's a number one starter, he's at least not supposed to give up 4 home runs. And I understand that's the first time in his career that he's done it. No shame to do it against that lineup, but one of those homers came against Ohtani. Most of them were against the rest of the lineup. And you come against Freeman or Betts. I guess Will Smith was mixed in there. Did Will Smith get one last night? Will Smith has gotten so many big hits, some home runs, some doubles, some singles against the Brewers. I lose track. But it's not like it was Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman stacking up home runs like Cordwood last night. It was the entire lineup shelling Colin Ray start to finish. And even if he's not an ace, even if he's not a true number one starter on a playoff team, you're at least supposed to be able to count on him to deliver a quality start and to give the team a chance to win. And last night he didn't do that. This really tilted me today. Okay. I'm annoyed enough. I think I made that clear last night. I'm sick of the Dodgers already. This really sent me earlier today. I was cutting bits of audio. I was cutting clips to use during Bill's show because I'm a believer in sports radio that you should come back from break with a quote from a player or a coach. I think sound bites, it really helps add to a sports talk radio show. So I'm always looking for little bits of sound during Bill's show that I can play and that I can use. And I was cutting highlights last night, Dodger highlights, because there were so few Brewers highlights. And in the highlight video that Major League Baseball posted on YouTube, there was this clip. And I heard it and I cut it, not because I liked it. I cut it because I hated it. And again, I know hate is a strong word. I hate it. These are the Dodgers television commentators last night talking about Colin Ray. And this just sent me. I want to play this for you. I think it's about 30 seconds. It's from last night.
I know we've pumped up Colin Ray and said what a great year he's having, and he is. Statistically, it's a great year, but peripherally, it is not. The actual ERA coming into the game is 3.38. The expected ERA from the exit velocities and all the different things that he has given up is a 4.76. That's over a 1.5 higher. So the Dodgers probably have the ability to get a few more runs.
And they did. And you know why that tilts me so much? They're right. They're right. Brewers fans and our cute little small market, our plucky team, overperforming expectations, trying to find bargains on certain players coming off of injury or reclamation project pitchers and coaching them up in the pitching lab. That's great. But then the Dodgers roll into town and they're like, all right, Colin Ray's been good, but still Colin Ray. And they're right. Because Colin Ray got shelled by the Dodgers lineup last night. And I heard that and I'm like, the worst thing in sports is when you're getting your ass pushed in And you want to clap back, but you can't. You can't clap back because they're right. They could get some more runs off Colin Ray. They did get more runs off Colin Ray. They hit 4 bombs off Colin Ray last night. It was a home run convention. Colin Ray was the friggin' keynote speaker. That sent me over the edge earlier today because they're right. There's nothing we can do about it. Is this, by the way, is this how Bears fans feel? Or is this how Bears fans have felt for years? Just getting pasted by the Packers twice a year, year after year after year. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. I don't think that's fair. I think that's an apples to oranges comparison because the NFL is actually balanced. The Bears are playing by the same sets of rules that the Packers play by. The Bears just suck. The Brewers are playing by different rules. They don't have the same amount of money. They don't have the same resources. And I know that money doesn't buy wins and it doesn't buy championships, but God, it certainly helps. The NFL is actually balanced. So I'm not even willing to be like, this must be how a Bears fan feels like, because look, Bears fans, you've had opportunities. Your team had so many opportunities to draft quarterbacks and get good players. They just didn't. They couldn't. I don't know what opportunities the Brewers have missed. Oh, well, they could have got Jack Flaherty at the deadline. Okay, that I agree with. The Dodgers got him, but let's not act like that. Like, would that have made a difference last night? Would that have made a difference Monday night? Might make a difference tonight because the Brewers are sending Frankie Montas out there. 4-inning Frankie. God, it's becoming too easy to come up with nicknames for certain guys on this team. That's not a good sign. It's never a good sign. I'm so sick of the series. I wish we could simulate. I wish we could fast forward to the end. I don't know that this series really tanks my expectations or my hopes and dreams for the Brewers in September and beyond. I see a lot of comments on Bill's live stream, and I always reference Bill's live stream because there's a lot of negativity on there. It's on the internet, so that makes sense. I see a lot of comments on Bill's live stream or comments on Facebook, our Facebook page, the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills, or on Twitter. It's like, well, this team's fine, but until they can beat the Dodgers and the Phillies, I'm out. I'm out until they can beat the Dodgers or the Phillies, until they can beat contenders. And the Brewers are 13-26 against the Los Angeles Dodgers since 2018, since the NLCS. Can't really argue with that data. I can't really take that number and say, well, a lot of the games were close. Okay, well, some of them maybe, but this year they haven't been. They haven't felt close. I don't think they've been close. Even the games that have bbeen close didn't feel close. Like, I can't argue with 13-26. I can't look at my fellow Brewers countrymen in the eye and be like, well, actually, they're right there. How can I say that? We all watch the games. We have eyes. We own televisions. We subscribe to Bally Sports, or probably find some other way to watch the game because Bally Sports and that app sucks, right? In that span, 13-26 since the 2018 NLCS, in that span, the Brewers have had teams driven by offense. They've had teams driven by defense. They've had teams driven by some mix of both. They've had teams driven by Ryan Healy. They've had 2 different managers. They've had 2 different GMs, including a year where David Stearns was kind of the GM, but basically wasn't. He's like, I can't do this anymore. The Hader trade completely and totally wrecked me. I need to take a year off. The rules have changed multiple times. We even had a pandemic in a 60-game season. And through all of it, the Dodgers have been led by Chris Taylor and Justin Turner and Manny Machado and Yasiel Puig and Max Muncy and Corey Seager and even that fat slob Jock Peterson. And it hasn't mattered. None of it has mattered at all. For whatever reason, the Brewers just can't beat the Dodgers. I don't know. Brewers have been good every year. They just can't beat the Dodgers. And I know some Brewers fans are listening to this right now, and I haven't looked at the comments or the text line yet. And I know what you're saying. I say, well, it's payroll. It's money. Yes, I'm aware. I'm aware of the payroll discrepancy between these two teams. I'm aware. But that payroll discrepancy doesn't lead to 13-26, especially when the Brewers have been very effective the last couple of years at rising up their level of competition to meet opponents. How many times under Craig Counsell, I think of the 2021 season started, they won those games in San Diego and they played well against Philly. Like, they've played well against other contenders. Don't act like they're 13-26 against every team with a big payroll since 2018, because that's not the case. It's just the Dodgers. And yes, I understand they're not paying as much money for their team as the Dodgers are. Like, I tweeted last night, I hate the Dodgers. And I got people in my mentions like, well, actually, you hate the league. You don't hate the Dodgers. You hate the league in the way that it's set. No, I hate the Dodgers. Okay. And stop explaining baseball to me on Twitter. There's like 3 or 4 people that are always in my mentions. They're like, well, actually, it's like, I'm not a baseball expert, but I watch games every night. Like, it's not lost on me that the Dodgers pay more money for their team. Okay. So stop. There's 3 or 4 people and you need to knock it off. Okay, it was getting obnoxious to me last night. I still believe, I have to believe, because my brain is overruling my heart today. I have to believe, I still believe that this is mostly random. And I'm not going to laugh this off. And I'm not going to tell Brewers fans, don't be bothered by the series. It's no big deal, because this has been offensive. We're getting punked, and it makes me upset. And I bet a lot of Brewers fans are made upset by this, because we're getting punked by the Dodgers again, and it sucks. I also don't think that this really changes the Brewers' outlook for September and beyond. I don't. Because the outlook for this Brewers team was always going to be win the division, get the best possible seed you can, and they're still leading the division. They have the largest lead over their division in Major League Baseball, American or National League. They're running away with their division. Well, their division's not that great. Okay, but the Brewers are 15 over. It's not like it's 2020 and they're sub 500 and they're falling ass backward into the playoffs. That's not it. They have been remarkably consistent compared to other contenders in the National League. They really haven't had an awful stretch. They've had down stretches, but they have been remarkably consistent. And I still believe their outlook for the next couple of months remains the same. Win the division, get the best possible seed you can, and hope that you catch fire in the playoffs. They were never going to be favored against the Dodgers. They were never going to be favored against the Phillies. Scott Grodsky was on Bill's show earlier today. I thought he made a brilliant point, and he said something that I've been saying basically all season. They're not going to be favored in a series against the Dodgers, but that doesn't mean they couldn't win. They're not going to be favored in a series against the Phillies, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't win. This team is never going to be built in a way where it's like, hey, this is the year. We're actually better than the Dodgers. We're actually more talented than the Dodgers this year. That's never going to happen. So the idea is be good every year, get into the playoffs every year, and hope that one of the years the Dodgers get cold and you get hot. And that is so realistic. That's still on the board, despite what's happened against the Dodgers this year. They lost 2 of the first 3. It feels like they'll never beat this team again. So they could split this series still if they're able to stop the bleeding tonight and then win tomorrow. I wouldn't hold my breath for that. But even if they get swept in this 4-game series, then you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say if the Brewers play the Dodgers in the postseason, my dumbass is going to talk. I'm going to talk myself into, well, it's hard to beat a team 5 times in a row. They're due. Right? That's the idea. That's the plan. And I don't think that plan has really changed, even though last night and the night before was awful. My heart tells me that this series is a death knell for the Brewers' chances long-term this year. So just embrace the negativity, embrace the futility. But my brain, however small my brain is, tells me, series really doesn't change a whole lot at all, because the Cardinals and the Cubs and every other team in the Central is as far away in the Brewers' rearview mirror as they've ever been at this point in the season. And the plan of the Brewers to just get in and get hot still very much on the board. I wouldn't pick them to beat the Dodgers. That's not what I'm saying. They won't be favored, but it's on the board. And I think that's kind of the spirit behind what the Brewers are trying to do year in and year out. Let's take a 3-minute break, get to some of your thoughts, your calls, your texts. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show back after this.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
August 16th and 17th in La Crosse, Wisconsin at the Fest Grounds. Friday night, Buck Jerry.
Y'all crazy, baby.
And Saturday night, Jacko.
I'm a lumberjacker, baby.
The Big River Rally.
And I'm gonna cut you in the side.
Get your tickets and find out more at BigRiverRally.com.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, welcome back. We're starting with the Brewers. Another Dodgers loss. We kind of did this last night. So if we talk about this for 5-10 more minutes, take a couple calls, I'm more than willing, more than ready to move on to the Packers. That's fine. I just want to make sure if you have Brewers thoughts, you have a chance to get them in. Couple of texts, 608-321-1670. Jared in Manitowoc says the Brewers are like the alcoholic dad from the movie Hoosiers. They are doing well and give us hope and are close to redemption, but the real team always shows up to disappoint us in the end. I mean, yeah, if we're talking about a regular season game against the Dodgers, like I said to start the show, they're 13-26 since LA, since the 2018 NLCS. And that's not counting the NLCS when, I mean, I guess they won 3 games and lost 4. So it's not like those games really would flip the record, but set that series aside. Since the Dodgers knocked them out in the NLCS and kept them from getting to their first World Series in a million years, they're 13-26. Yeah, if we're talking about regular season games against the Dodgers, I still contend, and I know this is difficult to swallow right now. In fact, I'm having a difficult time saying it. I'm struggling to put this out through my mouth to say, yeah, but I don't really know that this matters a ton, because the idea still remains for this Brewers team and the strategy from the front office, from the ownership down, ownership who probably have to talk a little bit about Mark Attanasio, what's going on with him today. At some point, we'll get to that tonight. A little bit of breaking news there. Breaking news, Funny news. It's great content. Talk about Mark Attanasio maybe later on in the show, but the idea from the top down is just stay good every year, try to win the division every year, get into the playoffs every year, and one of these years it's going to be your year. And I still think that plan is still very much on the board. Like, that hasn't changed. I know the last 2 nights have looked awful, and you're not feeling confident about a potential Brewers-Dodgers matchup in the postseason, but you weren't going to feel confident anyways. It's the Dodgers versus the Brewers. They're never going to be favored in that series. Some Brewers fans, they have this idea, well, one of these years you actually need to have a good enough team to beat the Dodgers. It's like, but they're never going to have that team. It's impossible, because they're never going to be able to sign Yamamoto and Ohtani and pay Freeman and pay back. So I still think this is the best path. It's just really frustrating. But guess what, Brewers fans? It's the life we lead. And if you're not about it, I don't know what to tell you. This is baseball fandom in a market like Milwaukee. 608-321-1670. Let's go to the phones. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Clemhead Mike.
Clemhead Mike. This is a comforting voice. I needed this right now. How are you tonight?
Oh, good, Grant. I feel terrible for you. I can hear it in your voice. I can see it on your face. You're feeling terrible. And I just want you to realize it's a lot. There's still a lot of season left. The Yelich could get healthy. The pitching could come around. We're in the dog days of August. I think the Brewers will be okay come playoff time.
They
they'll
could
be
be. They could, again, the idea is they could be. I'm not telling you they will be. I'm not telling you that they have a good chance to be, but they could. That's on the board. You're right when you say that. Yeah.
The Packers will be balling out by then, and you're going to feel a lot better.
That's true.
Emotions will be high. You'll be saying, well, maybe the Brewers might suck, but we got the Packers, and the Packers are kicking butt, and I feel a lot better about life, and it's just sports, and I'll be okay. And and you got a lot to look forward to. And you should, I started watching the Brewers in 1970. They sucked so bad for 10 years. You should have been a Brewers fan then. You would have hated life back then. We didn't have sports radio to vent our feelings back then. We just had to just deal with it.
I mean, all the 90s, all the 2000s. I mean, the years that they've contended are massively outnumbered by the years that they haven't, which is why Brewers fans, like, we should also, and I realize this is the wrong day to say this, the idea that it's even an option for the Brewers, Clemhead Mike, to just be good enough every year and to get into the playoffs. Oh my God, there were 10 or 15 or 20 year stretches where you would just kill for sneaking into the playoffs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So not to zoom out and to tell you to count your blessings, because this series sucks and it's embarrassing and I hate it. So I realize that this message is probably the wrong one today, but it's good perspective, Clemhead.
Yeah, I would have been happy with the 83 win season in those days. Just get me over 500. I would have been thrilled. So we'll be okay. I think the Brewers will be okay. I really do. Yelly will be back, and Kachirs will come around, and we're going to be fine. Like I said, we got the Packers. So
we do have the Packers, and Clemhead, I appreciate it. Thanks for the call. It's very common in this state for folks to say of the Brewers, well, they just got to get us to Packers season, right? The Brewers just got to get us through the summer to Packers season, and there have been years in my life where that's 100% been the case because the Brewers in my life haven't often contended. It's not like they've been the Packers or the Bucks recently where, they get into the playoffs every year, but they never go anywhere. Like the Brewers went, 30-something odd years, 40-something odd years? I don't know. I'm trying to do mental math on the air, which is never a good idea. But like they had long stretches where just simply getting into the playoffs wasn't on the board, right? So, yeah, you'd take this 100%. That's good perspective, Clemhead Mike. I don't know that today is the day because the Dodgers are punking us and I hate it and it bothers me. And as a fan, when I'm mad about my team and when I'm mad about how the game or a series is going, I don't want someone telling me, well, it's a long season. Think of 2002. It's like, okay, yeah, but it's not 2002 anymore. So I understand the perspective. I appreciate it, Mike. But also on today of all days, it's just not, as a Brewers fan, it's not what I'd want to hear. So I don't want to push that on you, Brewers fans that might be listening. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Tony from Texas.
Hey,
Let
Tony.
me tell you, Grant, contrary to popular belief, I did not have a silver spoon in my mouth when I was born.
And you know what, Tony? Son of a bitch. It's funny you mentioned that because everyone I talk to about the show, they're like, yeah, Tony must have been born loaded. I mean, it's something that we're always discussing.
Well, I've heard rumblings. Let's just say that.
From who? You know what? Never mind. I was going to ask from where and from who. Never mind. Just keep going. The point you were about to make a point. I'll let you make it.
My point is, as sports fans, as Brewer fans, we weren't given the silver spoon. We have to grind and watch bad Brewer baseball. And finally, we're in our golden era of Brewer baseball. And it's still not good enough. Now, I do think the 2018 team and the 2019 team, is that what I'm thinking? Those two teams were good enough to do it, to get it over the hump.
I agree.
And they just didn't get it done.
I agree.
But my point is, we're not going to have all this money. And I did hear something about Mark Attanasio actually being a billionaire. I don't know if you can confirm or refute that story about him bringing sand in from Malibu.
He is not I don't need to confirm the story. The story's been written and confirmed and published. He is not a billionaire, but my suspicions about his neighbor who's leading this lawsuit were for his neighbor's worth like over $100 billion. So I think Ebo threw this out on the morning show. His theory was that Mark Atanasio's neighbor is so much more rich than Mark. It's like, God, this poor hillbilly, he's only worth $700 million, lives next to me, and he keeps leaving his crap in the yard and going to steal sand from the beach down the road.
Unbelievable.
I think so.
So, the Brewers are always going to be this upping, like, I don't know, how do I explain it? They're going to be the underdog. They're going to be David. It's always, that's the way it is. But I want to hit the Packers really quick because the Packers are not David. And I talk about having a silver spoon in my mouth. You have your entire adult life, or actually your entire life as a Packer fan, possibly having 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, dare I say. All right, question to you really quick. You got 4 wide receivers that are potential studs. Watson, Wicks, Reed, and who's the 4th one?
Dobbs.
Dobbs. You buy stock right now for the next 7 years. Who has the best career? And I'll hang up and listen.
Well, you'll hang up. You'll take your answer off the air, as we say, Tony. I appreciate that call. Thank you. If I were to buy stock in one, I think, well, this maybe isn't true anymore. A couple months ago, I might have said Wicks, because I think Wicks stock is probably the cheapest and probably has the most upside. Watson, I think people are doubting. I think people were burned by Christian Watson in fantasy last year with how much time he missed. And if Watson, look, when Watson's been healthy, he's been a touchdown a game. When Watson's been healthy in his career, he's been unbelievable. And I think we've lost that a little bit. I think Packers fans and all of our complaining about his missed time due to injuries, and that's a fair complaint because that's frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for him too. But in all of our complaints about Christian Watson's availability, I think we've lost the fact that when he's healthy, he's awesome. It's not that, well, if he could just get healthy, then we'd know what we have. No, we know what we have. He's awesome. He's a star when he's healthy, right? So I don't know where his stock price would fall. Romeo Dobbs would be, and maybe we'd have to ask Big Ron about this. What's a boring stock that you would want in your investment portfolio for retirement that, like, it's never going to go to the moon, but it's never going to go, like, what's a stable stock as you'll find? I think that's Romeo Dobbs. Jaden Reed, I don't know, slot guy, led the team in receptions last year. I don't know. I'd probably say Wicks, and if you get Watson for a song, sure, those are the stocks that I would buy to try to make it big, get huge returns. If I was looking to retire and I wanted to buy stock for the next 40 years, I'd buy Romeo Dobbs because I think that's really stable. I don't know what real life stock that equates to. A mutual fund, maybe, I don't know. But then mutual funds are made up of stocks. I'm looking for a company or a business. I don't know. I don't have one. One more call, then we'll take our break. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Excellent. Great point. That's a perfect way to end this segment before going to break. It's the Wisco Sports Show. Let's pause for a couple minutes. More of your thoughts, and I want to get into the Packers next. Good transition, Tony. We'll get into Green Bay. Hear a little bit from Jordan Love when we come back. It's the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I get like, I want to vomit every time I hear number one receiver, to be honest with you. It drives me crazy. That's something that you guys talk about. I feel like we got a bunch of them. So, but I think they're all kind of, I think the beauty of them is they're all capable of doing many things, which gives us a lot of versatility from an offensive perspective in terms of how we use these guys and deploy their talents. I think, especially those I would say top four guys, they're all capable of being a number one in some capacity, and it's just how do we want to attack somebody and where do we want to put those guys, and it allows us, I mean, who's going to get the ball? I don't know. I mean, it could change on a week-to-week basis. We saw it last year. And then we have Bo Belton come in and be our first 100-yard receiver versus Minnesota. So I think it just, again, it frees us up in terms of just from an offensive standpoint and how we attack people.
It's Matt LaFleur yesterday. Or was it the day before? All these days start to run together. I know Jordan Love spoke yesterday, and we're going to hear that in a minute, but this has been something that's come up throughout the week. Matt LaFleur just keeps getting asked about who's your number one wide receiver, and it drives him nuts. It's the most football coach thing ever. And I understand why he'd be annoyed. Like, I understand. He's got a lot of good wide receivers, really from top to bottom on the roster. We talked about on Monday Grant DuBose and how I think he could be a pretty slick guy if he's the number 6 wide receiver to make the roster. Bo Melton, number 5. And then your top 4, Dobbs, Watson, Wicks, and Reed. I mean, Reed led the team in receptions. I think Christian Watson probably has the most star potential. Romeo Dobbs might be the most well-rounded. Dontavian Wicks, he's really good at everything too. Like if I was Matt LaFleur, I'd want the media to focus on that. Well, you don't have a number one. You're number one. And Matt LaFleur's, I want to vomit when I hear that. It's like, okay, I get why you'd be annoyed, but also, Matt, calm down. Calm down. And I bring this up all the time on the show, all the time. And I brought this up on Bill's show earlier today. Football coaches have to speak to the media, on Mondays and Wednesdays, and they might speak on Fridays, a couple times throughout the week, and then after a game. That's when NFL head coaches have to face the media and answer questions and conduct a press conference. And they get so whiny and worked up about this and that and the other thing. And I think football coaches are some of the funniest, most entertaining people on the planet because their brains are just wired a certain way where they are annoyed by things that annoy nobody else. They're excited about things that nobody else gets excited about. They draw conclusions that the normal human brain just couldn't. It's like, where did you get that? How'd you come up with that? Like Lucas Van Ness playing more snaps this preseason because he didn't get to play a lot at Iowa. Okay, that would make sense if he hadn't already been in the NFL for a full year. You know what I mean? Like, is Lucas Van Ness going to be finishing year 3? And Matt LaFleur's like, man, we got to, looking at his watch, looking at his notes, how many snaps we get? Well, remember, he's behind on career snaps because he didn't play that much at Iowa. So we got to get him into the preseason. Like, only an NFL coach could think that way. And they get so snippy over certain things. It's like, you guys wouldn't make it 5 minutes as a manager of a Major League Baseball club. You wouldn't, because those guys meet with the media before the game in the dugout. They meet with the media after the game in the media auditorium or in their office. They're you got to do the radio interview for the pregame show every night that you hear on the Brewers pregame. You'll hear it after the show tonight across all these stations. They're all Brewers affiliates. They're constant. Their whole life is meeting with the media. And baseball, it's a lot less transactional. It's a lot less dramatic day-to-day than football is. Football, all these games they mean the world, right? They're all must-wins. You lose 2 or 3 games in a row, it doesn't matter how successful you are. The walls start closing in. Like, the stakes in football are high, which means the theater of a press conference in football, there's a lot more to talk about. There's a lot more pressure that the media is exerting on a coach in football. In baseball, how many times Pat Murphy probably, or Craig Counsell before him, probably finishes an interview, closes his office door, and is just like, my God. How many times are they going to ask me that? I think of Josh Hader in 2019, maybe 2021. Can't remember which year. It was maybe 18. It was maybe 2018. Every other night, it's like, hey, Josh Hader was available. Why didn't you go to him? We're not going to pitch him when we're behind. We're not going to pitch. Every night. And Craig Counsell every night would be like, you guys keep asking me this. I'm going to give you the same answer, right? That's what baseball managers have to deal with. Football coaches, it's like, my God, Matt LaFleur gets asked about his number 1 wide receiver twice. He's like, I am physically ill when you bring that up. It's like, Jesus, man, it's August. Calm down. It's not that deep. It's not that serious. 608-321-1670 if you want to text or call the show. A couple texts here. Mike in Portage. I just want to read you these 2 texts. The text that I got from Mike last night versus the text that I got from him today. Last night at 4:19 p.m., Mike in Portage says, what I said at the start of the season on Over the Line is coming true. Colin Ray has turned into our ace and has only improved game by game and is now the most consistent and paints the corners like Picasso, like a portrait. And then the text I got today. As the president of the Colin Ray fan club, it saddens me to see last night's performance. I was really hoping he was going to pitch great and prove that he's close to being a top-tier pitcher. And Colin Ray sounded like he just attended his grandmother's funeral in the clubhouse last night. He's like, I thought I made some good pitches, man. They just smoked me. It sounded like he just got back from battle, watched a bunch of his buddies go down. It's like, man. Coyote Mike says, the Cowboys were the Packers' longstanding nemesis leading up to 96. Even in that season, the Cowboys beat the Packers 21-6. Yet, the Cowboys were beaten in the playoffs, and the Packers went on to dominate the Niners and win the Super Bowl. After that, the nemesis of the Cowboys were vanquished. Seemingly, the Dodgers are a similar nemesis of the Brewers. If the Brewers can keep pace with the Dodgers, then maybe one day someone else will do in the Dodgers. Seems like that's how this is going to need to go down. It's funny because the Brewers' whole MO is just get into the playoffs and get hot. And they keep getting beaten by the team that just gets into the playoffs and gets hot in some sick, twisted sense of irony that only Brewers fans can understand. Rockin' Rick says, why was it Van Ness first round if he didn't play at Iowa? Well, because of his physical traits, right? Not to this is a total Aaron Nagler point, but you don't draft guys because of college performance. You draft them because of NFL projection, right? There's players on the Badgers that play a ton of snaps that never get drafted because they're not physically or they're not gifted enough to be first-round picks. And also, Lucas Van Ness played for Kirk Ferentz. They don't start underclassmen in Iowa. Even if their best players are underclassmen, they still don't start them because they're a little old-fashioned like that, which, by the way, I thought we made pretty clear when Lucas Van Ness was drafted. I think the media did their job. I think Packers writers and sports talk radio hosts all were pretty clear when Lucas Van Ness was selected. It's like, hey, you're going to hear things of Lucas Van Ness like, he didn't start on Iowa. Here's why. It's a weird Big Ten West Kirk Ferentz thing. And Packers fandom was like, okay, And then fast forward a year, it's like, well, Lucas Van Ness, he even started Iowa. It's like, we just did this. Like, Rock and Rick, we talked about this so much. And I'm taking it out on you, Rock and Rick, because you're the person who sent the text, but it's like half of Packers fandom. I think Cone Roller does it sarcastically. He'd never admit to it, but when he calls in, it's like, man, I don't know about Van Ness. He didn't even start at Iowa. Cone, you know why. And I think you're playing dumb just to stir the pot, which Cone is very good at. Jordan Love. Speaking with the media yesterday, one soundbite jumped out to me more than any other. It's 20 seconds. Him speaking with Ryan Wood, I believe, who joins this show, joins Bill's show, great friend of our network, really good writer. Jordan Love speaking with Ryan Wood about the improvement in his deep ball so far in camp. Jordan Love explains a little bit why that is.
I think just working it, just getting more reps at it, understanding who my guys are out there, who I'm throwing it to. Obviously, trying to put the ball in there where they have a chance to catch it. But, understanding who's out there. A guy like Christian, maybe not put his foot there on it because he's going to run fast. But I think it's just work. Just continue to work it, get more comfortable, get more confidence throwing it.
So he talks about Christian Watson and their connection because, he's the guy probably more so than others. It's not that Romeo Doubs can't go deep. It's not that Wicks or Musgrave, who's really fast, and we often forget about it. It's not that those guys can't go deep. They can. I'm just saying Christian Watson has the size and the speed to be the cliche, take the top off a defense guy, right? So it's not to say that Jordan Love can only throw deep balls to Christian Watson, but that's probably a guy that he wants to have a good deep ball connection with because he's so fast, right? It would be like if Deshaun Jackson was on the team. It's like, well, we want to take deep shots to everybody. Obviously, yes, but Deshaun Jackson he's the prototypical deep shot guy. And that's kind of Christian Watson's skill set. It's come together in moments. It hasn't come together in long stretches because of his hamstrings and his health so far through his first 2 years. But it was interesting to me that Jordan Love pointed out, it's like, well, getting to know my guys, where I need to put the ball for them. And he basically said, well, Christian Watson's really fast. Listen to that one more time.
But, understanding who's out there. A guy like Christian, maybe not put his foot there on it because he's going to run fast. But I think it's just work. Just continue to work it, get more comfortable, get more confidence throwing it.
He's almost saying there, it's like Christian Watson is a little faster than even I thought. I can't put that much air under the ball. I can't throw the ball too high because he'll have to stop. Jordan Love is saying, I almost need to throw it on a line. I can't hang it up in the air because Christian Watson is so fast, he'll just run right by it. Now, there needs to be a certain level of elevation in the ball. Like he needs to put enough air under it. But I think if you go back and watch, and I think of those throws against Vegas and Pittsburgh and other games, the game early on in Detroit on Thanksgiving, first play of the game, they throw a shot play to Christian Watson and it was underthrown. Watson had to slow down and wait for it. I think Jordan Love is calibrating just exactly how fast Christian Watson is. Almost as if to say, I need to throw the ball to him a little bit differently because he's so fast. If I put too much air under the ball, he's just going to run right past it.
Maybe not put his foot there on it because he's going to run fast. But I think it's just work. Just continue to work it, get more comfortable, get more confidence throwing it.
He doesn't want to put too much air under it. I thought that was an interesting point. The rest of his press conference was mostly quarterback speak and mostly cliches, and that's fine. That's mostly what press conferences are. But what I like to do is listen to the whole thing, listen to it bit by bit, and circle, all right, that's something that I want to come back to. That's something I want to come back to. I'm glad to hear Christian Watson and Jordan Love are kind of coming together on this, and I'm really glad to hear, as most Packers fans are, that Jordan Love is starting to figure out that deep ball connection with some of his receivers because Jordan Love has a big arm. He has a talented arm. He has a live arm. He doesn't have a pop gun arm. He has the muscle and the ability and the skills to push the ball down the field. And yet, watching him last year, you wouldn't know it because he was underthrowing guys on a lot of those deep shots. He was coming up short to Christian Watson a lot, or he wasn't dialed in. And to see what's happened in training camp so far this year, and then to hear his comments there about, well, just getting in sync with guys, kind of understanding how quickly they move, how they like to get under the ball, where exactly I got to put the ball, how high or how low I got to put it. That tells me that the inaccuracy early on last year, at least with his deep passing down the field, it had nothing to do with his arm talent. It had nothing to do with his physical limitations. It had more to do with his experience, right? His chemistry with these guys and just figuring out what makes Christian Watson click. How high do I need to put it? How far do I need to put it? Right? Really getting it honed in. It was never an arm issue. At least right now, I don't believe that it was. it was just a reps issue. And now that they've had a chance to play together, to get an entire season under their belt, now to have a second training camp. And I think, did Christian Watson miss a lot of, I know he missed a lot of training camp as a rookie. I don't know. When did Christian Watson, I'm thinking through this on the air. I should just take my break. We got to take one anyways. Let me look up something. I'm curious to see. I want to research something over this break. So we're going to take a 3-minute break. I want to come back to this. Stay right here. Mentally on this topic, stay right here. I just need to go dig up a little information and we'll come back and wrap up hour number 1. More Jordan Love, Christian Watson, deep ball talk next as we wrap up the first hour of the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, we continue, wrapping up hour number 1. Still going to get to Jesse Temple in the second hour of the show. I still want to talk about A.J. Dillon. Kind of clapped back against the fans and the media. That's a little dramatic, but stood up for himself a little bit in an interview with a local Green Bay TV station. And again, when we get there, I will make sure to credit the reporter and the station and the source. I just don't know. I don't know my Fox Valley television stations off the top of my head. And for that, I apologize. When we went to that last break, we were talking about Christian Watson and his connection with Jordan Love on deep passes. And what I couldn't remember and why I just stopped, I said, let me take a break. Let me Google this to make sure I have it right. So Christian Watson missed his rookie training camp with surgery. Remember? So he missed his first training camp with Aaron Rodgers, but was ready for week 1 against the Vikings. But he joined the team week 1 basically after missing all of training camp. And then he missed time throughout the year. And when he was healthy again, he was great. What I was trying to remember for last year, did he miss any time at training camp? And did he miss games early on? I couldn't remember 100%. And luckily, I found his game log, and his Wikipedia page actually lays this out really well. So lucky me, I didn't have to dig too hard. I'm just going to read directly from Wikipedia. While having perfect attendance during training camp, Watson started off the 2023 season with a hamstring injury, causing him to miss practice. He was subsequently marked inactive for the first 3 games. Watson would be marked active for week 4 against the Detroit Lions. That was his season debut. And then, some highlights against the Chiefs and Thanksgiving. But my point was Christian Watson missed basically all of his rookie training camp. And I keep telling you, those reps matter so much, which is why I'm worried about Edgerrin Cooper. To a lesser degree, Jordan Morgan, he's back at practice, but also worried about Tyron Hopper, worried about Marshawn Lloyd, definitely, because I think he needs the reps. He needs the time. He's got to work on blocking and pass catching and not fumbling, all of those things, right? Christian Watson missed all of his rookie training camp, which is time that him and Rodgers could have worked together on their deep passing. But more specifically, last year, while he was around in camp, he missed the first portion of the season. So now Jordan Love and Christian Watson are basically having to work on their deep ball chemistry in real time in regular season games. And my God, go back and watch the footage. It's obvious that that's what they were doing. They were trying to figure out, how much arc do I need? How far do I got to throw the ball? Yes, he's running a fly route or a post or whatever. I'm not a football coach. We know the routes and we know where the ball is supposed to go, but those little idiosyncrasies or intricacies or whatever word you want to use with Christian Watson's size and speed compared to Dobbs or Wicks or other wide receivers, that stuff takes time. And last year we were going nuts. It's like, how can you underthrow Watson? How can you, you're supposed to have all this arm talent, Jordan Love. How do you look this bad throwing the ball deep? Well, they were learning how to play together in real time. He missed almost the first month of the season. This year, hopefully, with all the camp, all the preseason, they hit the ground running. And it looks different. It's looked a lot better in camp so far, for whatever that's worth. Hour 2, Wisco Sports Show next. First, an update, Zach Heilprin.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, any drama around the battle for the starting quarterback job at Wisconsin came to an end this morning. That's when offensive coordinator Phil Longo announced that Miami transfer Tyler Van Dyke had been named the starter over sophomore Braden Locke. The two battled it out during spring and the first 2 weeks of fall camp. So what separated the two? Longo said there were a number of things.
Probably the big separator right now, bigger arm. He probably wins and drives the ball better in the smaller holes. Both can throw the deep ball well. There's probably a greater range with Tyler. And then he has done an absolute, a hell of a job running the football and extending plays when he needs to. And he's shown that he can extend plays with his legs. And, that was another key factor in the decision.
Van Dyke has been taking all the first-team reps since Sunday. Locke will continue to take the number 2 reps as the Badgers inch closer to the start of the season. That's just 2 weeks from Friday against Western Michigan. Turning to the Packers, they are headed to Denver tomorrow. It's where they're going to take part in a joint practice with the Broncos on Friday. The two teams will then match up in the second preseason game on Sunday. Quarterback Jordan Love not going to play for the Packers, meaning Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt will handle all the reps behind center.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
When a company only does business in Wisconsin, that's Wisconsin Strong. Rural Mutual provides all lines of insurance, including commercial, farm, home, and auto. And your premiums stay right here to keep Wisconsin strong. Local agents, local underwriters, local claims adjusters.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, Frankie Montas going to be on the mound for Milwaukee tonight against the Dodgers as they look to snap a 3-game losing streak. L.A. counters with Walker Buehler. First pitch at American Family Field is slated for 7:10. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heilprin.
I know we've pumped up Colin Ray and said what a great year he's having, and he is. Statistically, it's a great year, but peripherally, it is not. The actual ERA coming in the game is 3.38. The expected ERA from the exit velocities and all the different things that he has given up is a 4.76. That's over a 1.5 higher. So the Dodgers probably have the ability to get a few more runs.
Every mistake we made, they took advantage of it. You know, they had some really good at-bats. You know, even with 2 strikes, they seem to hit the ball pretty hard. So they definitely hit those mistakes and took advantage of it.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Some really depressing audio from last night's game. The Dodgers commentators basically saying, I know Brewers fans love Colin Ray, and they think he's a number 1, but mostly he's just fine. And they were right. They hit 4 home runs off of him. It's supposed to be the best that we have. And then Colin Ray after the game in the clubhouse sounds like someone just shot his dog. Ugh. Vibes are low. Can't wait for game 3 tonight. Luckily, we have Frankie Montas. 4-inning Frankie Montas. Frankie Montas. I shouldn't be so judgmental of Frankie Montas. He just got here. 4-inning Frankie. That's good, though. If he only goes 4 innings tonight, we're hammering that on the show tomorrow. And on Twitter tonight, Brewers Twitter. We're going to need to get that going this evening. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Twitter, @Wisco Grant. You can text and call the show. I want to get back to the calls here in just a couple minutes. 608-321-1670. Jesse Temple going to join us to talk Wisconsin Badger football. They're back from Platteville. They're now back practicing in Madison. And as I told Zach earlier today when I called to put him on with Bill, Zach, I know that the media begins with me, and I'm just glad that you guys don't have to drive down to Platteville every day anymore. And Zach could sense the sarcasm. He didn't even sense the sarcasm in my voice. He sensed the sarcasm coming a mile away. And he's like, thank you for that, Grant. Thank you for thinking of me. So I'm glad that the Badgers beat. Now back at home as the team is. And we're going to talk about some of the things that Jesse's seeing at practice. We learned today that Tyler Van Dyke officially going to be the starter, which is the way that this has been trending for weeks. But Fickle and others have kind of put off any proclamations and any hardcore answers about certain jobs or position groups. It's like, well, when we get back to Madison, we'll start to do those things. Well, now they're back, and we know officially who the starting quarterback is going to be, among other things going on with the team. And we'll talk in detail with Jesse Temple coming up. If you want to call in, talk Brewers, Packers, whatever, happy to have you. Before we get to Jesse, maybe to start the next segment, I do want to play some audio of A.J. Dillon getting a little snappy with Packers fans. And I like it. I think it's in bounds. I think it's fair. I know some Packers fans didn't like it. You don't have to like it. I'll tell you how I feel, and we can discuss coming up. All right, phone calls. 608-321-1670. Let's go. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant Bills.
Vagabond John.
About Christian Watson again. We're talking about Christian Watson learning on the fly from his hamstring injury. Hey, wasn't there something about him fixing that? Didn't he discover something about his hamstrings this year that we're going to be able to fix going forward?
Supposedly, yeah, and I hope that's true, but that wasn't the case. I'm just talking about the last 2 years. I'm talking about the time that he missed and how that probably affected his ability to get in sync with his quarterbacks.
So it's 2024, and I work all day with AI companies and all these new technologies and whatnot. Look, if we have the ability to identify a hamstring imbalance, that needs to be done pre-draft. Am I the only one crazy thinking about this? We've got Marshawn Lloyd now. I know he's 28 years old or whatever, but what these kids coming out of college, we're drafting, we're putting them through all these evaluations. If we have that technology, these GMs got to be doing this evaluation pre-draft, right? Because if you got a guy that's way imbalanced in his hamstrings, we can't be having these rookies losing this time. Am I crazy for thinking this?
No, I mean, they get physicals with these guys, don't they? I'm sure they only get a limited number, but for players you're considering in the first or second round, I'd imagine they get physicals. I just don't know how much they're allowed to poke and prod. I don't think they're taking muscle biopsies in these physicals. You know what I mean? I don't know how invasive and how really down in the weeds they can get with these guys' bodies. Maybe that's a lesson that the Packers learn. If they're looking at speedy wide receivers or players that rely on speed, maybe the hamstrings, maybe that's something that they look at. I don't know.
Maybe NFL fans just need a petition. We want the players to play. How do we do that? Make sure that we're drafting healthy players. How do we do that? Let's poke and prod a little bit more. Come on, you're making millions of dollars. I can poke you anywhere I want to.
I can get behind that. Let's be clear. They are poking. I'm not poking anybody. I'm not poking and prodding players, but the team, the licensed physicians that are authorized to do such things. Yeah, I don't think that would be the end of the world.
Glad to hear you won't be doing any poking of the players. When it comes to the Badgers on the field, yes, excited to see that it's solidified. Got a little nervous, although we saw Braden Locke have a couple of flashes last year. So I think knowing that it was a close competition is at least good for the depth of the QB room. Got into a little bit of conversation with Badger fans earlier today about and actually it was an Ohio State fan that came into our friend group and asked the question, What's the confidence level? Why are you guys going to be better this year than last year? And I'm legitimately excited about the skill positions. I think the receiver room is overhauled. I know Will Pauling's returning. Tawi Walker is making all kinds of noise on video with his contact.
Sounds great as a number 2 runner behind Ches Malusi right now. Yeah, I've heard the same and seen the same, probably from the same places that you've seen and heard it. It's not like I have inside info. I've seen the same stuff.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying that I'm excited about the skill positions. And let's be honest, when it comes to the quarterback, we cannot get worse when you think about what the expectations were to what we saw from Tannenberg. And I will only evaluate the first 5 games. And when you're thinking about this is supposed to be the year with an air raid offense, we're going to have record-setting production. And through 5.5 games, you have 3 touchdowns and 3 picks, and then he gets injured. He comes back, he throws 3 touchdowns in a bowl game to get him to 9 tutties. But I mean, through 9.5 games, you had 6 touchdowns? Grant, that's not production that we were expecting.
Well, especially in an offense that's supposed to be this high-flying air raid, right? And whether that was a fair labeling by us or not, like that was the expectation.
Yeah, and so I'm excited to see, and I don't think it's being unfair to Tanner. He's a 6-year player. The system was the system. That's why he was recruited there. He should have been familiar with it. Now, this new guy coming in, I don't think it can get worse. I don't think we're going to fall into that same trap. We're not going to have the same expectations. The one area I'm worried about, and I don't know if your interview with Jesse is live or recorded, but the question I'd be interested in asking is, how confident are we in the trench depth? We talked about it with the Packers yesterday, and a guy like Monk being able to play all these different positions and step in and ripping people's arms off. I'm looking at the 2 deep on this offensive line, and there's some guys, and I follow college football pretty closely. There's names on there that I've never heard, and I'm a little nervous, like, okay, if 1 or 2 guys goes down on either offensive or defensive line, can Wisconsin hold up against Oregon, Alabama? These big-time programs.
Holding up against Oregon and Alabama and Vagabond John, I got to run. I appreciate it. That's one thing. Holding up against Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, Minnesota. I'm not saying that I don't want to judge Wisconsin on the best of the best, but Oregon and Ohio State are quite literally the best of the best. They're both AP top 5 schools in the first rankings that came out this year. So I'm not saying that I want to judge the Badgers on a harsh curve too. Like, my expectations are high. This is a legit program, or it should be a legit program. I mean, depth to hold up with those schools, that's maybe a little bit of a pipe dream. Now, this interview that I'm doing with Jesse is not live. I talked to him about an hour before the show. But Bill talked to Jesse earlier today and specifically asked him about offensive line depth. Actually, I take it back. He talked to Zach, which I should really know because I'm the one who sets up the interviews. Talked to Zach about offensive line depth. And you know what I'll do just for you, Vagabond John? For some callers, I'd say go find the podcast, go listen to it. You can hear it in hour number 3 of Bill's show. But you know what I'll do is over this next commercial break, I'll go find that audio for you and I'll play it in our next segment, because that's what I do for especially routine listeners, loyal listeners like yourself. But Zach basically said, yeah, the depth along the trenches is better. And we've talked about the defensive line and especially linebackers, because Luke Fickell was banging that drum in Big Ten Media Days. Haven't really talked as much about offensive line. And Zach spoke specifically to that. He was asked directly by Bill about that earlier today. I'll find that audio over the next break and I'll get it to you, Vagabond John. So just hang tight. Now, if you want to go listen to Bill's pod, I would also recommend that because that's a good show, but I'll find it, seeing you specifically ask. 608-321-1670. Let's take another call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Love following Vagabond John. I agree with him on all fronts with Christian Watson. The thing that kind of, makes me a little nervous about his NFL career and longevity is if he has this hamstring imbalance, does he have to reinvent the way he runs and walks? Is that even possible for an age 24, whatever he is, athlete?
My feeling would be, okay, so this is a good question and not something that I thought about. When they discovered his hamstring, they discovered a hamstring imbalance, right? The legs are different legs. There's an imbalance, right? They discovered that. What I guess is now just occurring to me, and this is why you're an excellent caller, Cone, what did they do? What did they do about it? You know what I mean? They found the imbalance. I don't think he had surgery to shorten one of his legs. So my guess would probably be some sort of active physical therapy, some sort of program to stretch this and to work on that. I don't know that the way he runs will be impacted, but I think he's been probably would be my guess, doing workouts and some sort of physical therapy to kind of compensate that and to get his body in balance. That'd be my guess.
I agree, but like my thought is like that imbalance got there somehow. Like I can't imagine he's doing single leg squats or RDLs at different weights on hamstring. So we'll see. I mean, if it causes him to slow down a little bit, that might help out Jordan Love because after all, we just decided Christian Watson might be too fast.
He might be too fast. He's actually and I'm interested to see this season now that they've had a chance to play not a full season together, but they got a couple really nice stretches as a quarterback and a deep threat wide receiver last year where they, especially towards the end of the year, started to figure it out. Now they've had a training camp, some preseason, and how good is it going to look? I think we might get into the season and really see Jordan Love uncork some passes farther than really anything that we saw last year, now that he kind of knows what Christian Watson is capable of as a downfield threat.
Yeah, agreed. I know Keyshawn, I know Nixon is our, punt and kick returner, but, maybe we get Watson back there if he's not going to be contributing, to the receiver room.
Sure.
Other things on the pre-draft, questions and workouts and all that. This is another reason you need to watch off-season Hard Knocks with the Giants. It really just comes down to these head coaches flexing their egos on these college kids.
Really?
Giving them random plays to draw up, having them make audible calls, all that, all this, BS, football terminology, and until Brian Dable. So he just comes across as kind of being a little D-bag.
So you're saying these meetings with prospects is more just about the coaches trying to show off how smart they are rather than actually trying to have a productive meeting and get useful information from a guy they might draft. Is that what you're saying? Am I hearing correctly?
That was my takeaway and observation from the off-season Giants Hard Knocks.
Interesting. I don't have the patience for Hard Knocks. I'm watching Brewer games, and if I'm not watching Brewer games, I'm probably not watching TV. That is interesting, though. That's what I want to know. And Kona, I appreciate it. I get to another caller. What are they doing in these physicals? What are they allowed to test for? I would imagine time is limited. They can't MRI, they can't do invasive surgery on these guys. It has to be somewhat surface level. But for a player like Watson, who's as tall and strong as he is, who relies on speed, right, and health is a concern, maybe in the future, can teams find a way to test for imbalances and to make sure the body is aligned, if you will. But my guess would be that hamstring specialist set him up with some sort of plan, do these stretches, do these workouts, apply this thing to this part of your body, and that's going to help you kind of remain in balance. And it's probably something that he's going to have to do consistently, right? But that's what NFL players have to do. Their job is to get their body right to be able to play and to be able to be there for their team. The best ability is availability. How often do we have to say that as football fans? You can't make the club from the tub, as they say. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Yeah, it's Darnell.
Darnell, what's going on, man?
Hey, in an attempt to answer Cohen's question there, I believe I read when they first came out with the hamstring stuff with Christian Watson, that they have him doing RDLs and single leg squats and stuff like that with different weights to try and get that balance or back into balance, as opposed to having him change up his entire walking and running routines.
What's RDL stand for again? I missed that class.
Okay, I don't actually know what they stand for. I'm not gonna lie. What I do know is I know what the exercise motion is, which is it's basically where you are squatting your back down as opposed to your actual butt. You're sticking your butt out and leaning way forward as in an attempt to strengthen your hamstring and your the back of your leg. Does that make does that motion make sense?
No, it does. I'm seeing Romanian deadlift. Does that sound correct?
That does sound correct. So a deadlift obviously is where you're working your back, but generally you want to have your butt sticking out when you're doing your deadlifts if you're doing those correctly. When you're doing the RDLs, you're sticking your butt you're leaving your legs straight or something like that. Anyways,
you got a real good grip on this, man. It sounds like you're all over you're all over it.
Well, I do like to work out. I don't get there as often as I would like these days, but I do remember reading something about back when they first came out with this report here, that they're having him on a different kind of workout regimen and that kind of thing in order to get that balance. And I think they said they got it more balanced just in like the off-season work that they did. Like where when he came in for the player workouts and stuff in April, like he was already more balanced than he was just based on what they were doing.
So it didn't take much, is what you're saying. They figured this out pretty quickly, which makes me feel good.
I mean, that should make us feel good. And also, I mean, these are world-class athletes who can change what they're doing pretty easily. It's not like they have to go to work during the day or, you know what I mean? Like they can change that kind of stuff. And they have world-class doctors and therapists and stuff that are telling them how to do this stuff. And they have the top scientists figuring this stuff out from UW-Madison, right? So, you know, there's a million things that they can do to get this stuff like worked out, and I think that it certainly sounds like they did something right.
That's another thing that's funny about this, and Darnell, I appreciate it, is they told us, well, we're going to search far and wide, we're going to find the best experts, we're going to find the best people, and maybe the best hamstrings on planet Earth are forged at UW-Madison. I just find it convenient that they traveled, what, 2.5, 3 hours tops. It's like, man, we looked all over. We found the best of the best. Oh, really? Where'd you go? Middleton. It's just funny to me. Maybe the best hamstring experts are in UW-Madison. Maybe they're in the UW system. It could be. I find it a little convenient is all. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I would never disparage the fine UW system of which I graduated. Not UW-Madison. Calm down. It's not stolen valor. Still the same system, though. 608-321-1670. One more call, and then we'll take a break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric on I-90. How are you this evening?
I'm great. So you got my little Facebook post I sent you?
I did. The messages of my Facebook page are filled with videos of shipyards.
Yeah. I like that. I like to send you that stuff when I find it, you know?
It's good stuff.
Some of that stuff is very interesting, too, if you read into it. But, all right, we got a busy show here. I got a lot of things to get to. First of all, it's an apology. It's an apology to you, Grant, because you were talking about number 6 wide receivers, and I kind of gave the impression that these guys don't matter. But if you remember, a number 6 wide receiver had the walk-off touchdown to win the Super Bowl.
Kadarius Toney?
Last year.
Sky Moore?
That guy who caught the last touchdown of the game.
Who even caught it? Do you remember who it was? Who was it?
I don't remember who it was, but he wasn't even on the team at the beginning of the year.
Well, let's hope not, because neither one of us can remember his name. It wasn't Sky Moore, was it?
I don't know who it was,
okay.
But clearly a number 6 wide receiver that counted. Right?
Oh, Mecole Hardman. He was on the Jets. That's right. I forgot about that guy.
So you are right to be worried about the number 6 wide receiver. Number 7's too far. Number 6.
Yeah, we're not animals. I mean, we're not fanatics here. We're
right.
reasonable sports talkers. I'm talking about number 6.
Reasonable.
There you go.
I kind of actually picture you sitting down with like a chessboard with the whole Packers lineup on there.
You really think so?
And then you're like, you got to go. We got this guy, and this guy, and then we got to talk about this guy, right?
Well, wide receivers are easy to talk about because we can watch them play in preseason. And even a knob like me who's never played a snap of organized football can say, oh, that guy, nice catch. You know, it's a little bit easier to follow than some other positions.
Right. And you know, today I was listening to Phil's show today, and you were talking about like number 1 wide receivers. And I really think that grows out of something. It's really a relevant term. Like some teams have a number 1 receiver because one receiver is so far and above the rest of the group, and that's probably not the case in Green Bay. So it's hard to define a number 1 wide receiver.
It is, and I think a number 1 wide receiver, and Eric, I'm just behind. I'm woefully late, so I got to run. I think a number 1 wide receiver, it's contextual, right? How much better is that guy relative to the rest of the team? Now, in the case of the Vikings, Justin Jefferson is so unbelievable that he's probably a number 1 in any context that you drop him in, right? CeeDee Lamb's a number 1 because no one else on the team. I don't know that Packers fans say, well, we don't have a number one. I don't know that isn't to say that Wicks couldn't be that guy one day or Watson couldn't be that guy one day, but there's a bunch of them and they're all kind of at the same level. So yes, I agree, Eric. It's an excellent call. I appreciate it. Sorry to be a little short with you, but I got to go. 3 minutes when we come back. I'm going to play this audio from Zach earlier today on the offensive line depth, the trench depth, as Vagabond John said of the Badgers. Jesse Temple yet to join us from The Athletic to talk Wisconsin football. They're back in Madison this week after being in Platteville for the last few weeks. A lot still to get to. We have so much to fit into the next 40 minutes. Wisco Sports Show. We're back after this.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
Bill Michaels here. Get your two-wheel engines revved up. Here it comes. The Big River Rally coming to La Crosse, August 16th and 17th, where the river meets the road. Join us for all the action. There's going to be a stunt show, a bike show, food trucks, vendors of all types, and great music. Buck Cherry rocking Friday night, and yes, we're going to ride. I'm going to be leading the 100-plus mile ride on Saturday the 17th, and then bringing you back with the headliner Jackal taking the stage later that night. For tickets and info, go to BigRiverRally.com. That's BigRiverRally.com, and I'll see you there.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
What is their depth? If, say, there is injuries on an offensive line, give me your thoughts on the depth with guys like Duran and Kodanko, and, you know, you kind of go through that whole list of guys that they have. What is their depth like?
Yeah, so today, with Riley Bowman out, Jack Nelson's brother, Barrett Nelson, was the starting right tackle. So it was the four that you mentioned, and then Barrett Nelson. And then behind them, there were three true freshmen, Gary Kodanko, who's a walk-on, and Duran with the second group. So it's a young offensive line group, but they have
very, very high expectations for some of these true freshmen that they brought in. A kid out of Pennsylvania who came in early, Kevin Haywood. He's been running with the starters at right tackle while Malman and Barrett Nelson were out. He's now back at left tackle. They brought in a kid, Emerson Mandel, the top-ranked offensive lineman. In some people, the top-ranked player in the state of Minnesota. He's another true freshman. He's at right tackle. And then Colin Coverly at right guard. They have a number of really, really young guys behind them, talented guys. I think if they had their choice, they wouldn't have to play them this year. But if they're thrown into the mix, I don't think that they're going to be in over their head, at least against some of the competition that they face in the first 2 weeks. Week 3, maybe a little bit different because Alabama's different, but they have solid depth. Last year, they didn't have any injuries whatsoever along the offensive line, except for Jake Renfro, and Trevor Bortolini filled in. So they didn't really have to look at the depth. This year, I think if they do have any, going to be some young guys.
Asked and answered. Vagabond John. Offensive line depth. Trench depth. There you go. Zach Heilprin earlier today on the Bill Michaels show. And Zach kind of echoing what I said to Vagabond John. Vagabond John's like, well, we need depth in the trenches if we're going to hang with Oregon and Ohio State. Well, I don't know that that's in the cards. Like, I don't know if the Badgers are going to be able to lose their left guard and their right tackle and just slide guys in. It's okay. We can handle the Buckeyes. We got good backups. Well, I don't know. It's not that I don't want to hold the Badgers to a high standard. I do. It's just that Oregon and Ohio State, man, those are 2 top 5 teams in the country. They might end up being top 2, top 3 teams in the country. We'll see how the season goes. But there's Zach talking about offensive line depth earlier today on the Bill Michaels show. Before we get to Jesse Temple, a little bit of a quick segment here. I want to play you this audio from A.J. Dillon. Now, A.J. Dillon failed to pick up 2 very short down and distances in Saturday's preseason game. And fans weren't thrilled about it. In fact, fans kind of got after him on Twitter, which is well within the right of fans to do. That's why fans exist. That's why Twitter exists. Now, I'm not a big fan of adding the player, tweeting, oh my gosh, A.J. Dillon needs to pick that up, versus tweeting at A.J. Dillon saying, you suck, you need to pick that up. Those are 2 different things. But fans should be able to speak on things like that. Now, a Green Bay television reporter asked him about it, and I'm going to credit him after I play this clip. He said, hey, fans on Twitter, they're like, hey, why didn't you get a yard, A.J. Dillon? What do you feel about that? Here was what Dillon had to say. It's about 60 seconds.
I graded a 98%. If you know football, you watch the tape, and you don't look at the stats, and you are actually putting yourself in the game, somebody else go out there and do more than what I did. Yeah. That's just a situation, and that's football. And sometimes you have a drive like that where, you know, a block doesn't happen here, block doesn't happen there. I don't know what Twitter said because I don't go on Twitter unless I'm posting something, but I can imagine somebody, you know, like there's nowhere you're gonna go there in those certain situations. But in all honesty, man, like if you don't live inside my house, your opinion to me is so secondary that I couldn't be bothered with it. But to anybody on Twitter or whatever, you can't do what we're doing. Just enjoy, just watch. And I promise you, everybody in this building is working their ass off to do the best they can.
What if A.J. Dillon got home and his wife was like, you need to pick up that 4th and 1? I get what he's saying. I also think A.J. Dillon is in a tough spot. Like, we talk about him like he's some short down and distance specialist, and it's kind of the role that he's fallen into one way or another. At least that's the way that fans see it. He was drafted in the 2nd round to be a feature back one day. It's not like they were drafting Aaron Ripkowski. Like, they thought A.J. Dillon could be a feature running back upon the departure of Jamal Williams and eventually Aaron Jones. And he just hasn't been that. By the way, that's courtesy of Fox 11, Cody Krupp in Green Bay. I completely am fine with it. It wasn't blocked well. But Saturday is really secondary to me. I don't really care. I just think A.J. Dillon, for the most part, was drafted with the idea of one day you're going to take over as the lead guy. And not only hasn't he done that, now fans are looking at him like, well, you need to get a yard. It's like, well, I don't even know if he's the guy to do that. Now, he's on this roster because I am not buying what Marshawn Lloyd is selling at this moment in time. He hasn't even been healthy. And when he has been healthy, he's been underwhelming. Shout out Vagabond John. He's going to continue to bang that drum. But I'm fine with it. I like the fire from A.J. Dillon. Good. I want him to be upset. He should be upset. His career really hasn't gone as many have wanted. I'm sure even as he's wanted. Since the Titans game his rookie year, that's really been it. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back, talk more Badger football. Jesse Temple of The Athletic for his weekly visit. They're back in Madison. We now have a starting quarterback. We'll talk about all that and more, including an interesting thought I had about the Alabama game, which is now a month away. It's crazy. Wisco Sports Show back after this.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Going to move quick so we can get into our conversation with Jesse Temple. The Brewers lineup is out. Any closing thoughts and comments from the Talk and Text line on the Packers or the Brewers or the Badgers? Anything else? We'll get to that right before 6 o'clock as we wrap up the show. Our weekly visit with Jesse Temple. He stops by every show on our network throughout the week. He'll be on with Bill tomorrow. You can hear him on The Camp with Zach Heilprin, one of my favorite podcasts. And, of course, you can read his work at The Athletic. Jesse and I talked right before the show started today. Here's our conversation. Jesse Temple is here with The Athletic. Practices is now shifted from Platteville back to Camp Randall. Jesse, maybe I read this wrong, but it seemed like Luke Fickell, as coaches do, would kind of dance around giving you guys definitive answers. And he kind of kept saying, well, when we get back to, camp, when we get back home, maybe we'll start to decide this and that, maybe start making designations. I know Van Dyke was announced as the official starter today. Other than that, and we could talk about Van Dyke, but along with Van Dyke, is there anything else that's kind of crystallized and solidified since the team has returned from Platteville?
Well, I think that's certainly the most noteworthy declaration here is Phil Longo saying after practice Wednesday that Tyler Van Dyke is the starter. We knew that this was the case, even if it hadn't been announced. Van Dyke has taken all the first-team reps since the Sunday night scrimmage at UW Platteville, which means he's been the first-team quarterback for 3 consecutive practices. I think there were some very obvious traits that helped him to stand out. First of all, the accuracy and power on the passes that he throws are noticeable, and his ability to succeed in the RPO game as a runner. Those two things really separated him from Braden Locke. So that is first and foremost. I think a lot of different position groups are starting to come together, but the quarterback competition is the sexiest and usually the first thing people discuss.
Yeah, and that was made official just earlier this afternoon. Longo and Fickell both talking about it. I asked you last week about Ches Belusi and kind of his spot. He's been dealing with injuries, and it just feels like really bad luck. I feel bad for any player that's injured, but I think Belusi made a great decision transferring to Wisconsin. I think the role was perfect for him. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. From what I've seen and what I've read, it looks like Belusi and Walker, their transfer from Oklahoma, but they're those two really talented freshmen as well. Tell me about Belusi and Walker as a potential 1-2 punch and how they work off each other and would work in Phil Longo's offense.
It's a very deep and talented running back room. I would say, without question, deeper than last year in large part because not only did they add to Walker from Oklahoma, but they have 2 4-star freshmen in Dillon Jones and Darian Dupree, both of whom I think could see the field in some capacity this year. But Walker and Belusi, to me, have a chance to be a really dynamic 1-2 combination. I thought it was important that Ches, who was held out of contact drills earlier this preseason, came back to participate in the scrimmage on Sunday and has been back ever since. We kind of know what Ches is about. We saw it early last season. I thought he was a great fit for this offensive system under Phil Longo, but Tawee Walker is really surprised. He's a career backup at Oklahoma for 2 years. He runs with such power and speed that I think he's going to be a problem for some defenses. We've seen him knock the helmet straight off of Ricardo Hallman on a tackle attempt on a ball into the flat. So those 2 guys I would expect to get the lion's share of the carries, but there's enough talent here that they could utilize a third running back and potentially even a fourth, depending on the circumstance.
Well, and that goes without saying, like, you never want to put this out into the ether, but guys get hurt and opportunities arise. It's a long season. I saw so much Darian Dupree stuff on my Twitter timeline today. Do you think at some point this season he plays a real role? Because these guys aren't talked about like they're freshmen. They seem ready physically and mentally. These 2 freshmen, these 4-stars, they seem about it.
Yeah, I think both of them could be contributors. It's just really hard to say right now because if you're saying that Walker and Belusi are your top 2 guys, how many opportunities are really going to be left? And by the way, there still is Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli, who are veterans, who were a part of this team last year, and they have taken advantage of their opportunities. But I would say that Dupree and Jones are just so dynamic. It's noticeable. You don't often see that from freshmen. Where Dupree really shines is as a pass catcher. It's something he did very effectively at Mount Carmel last season in Chicago. So they can split him out and get him the ball in open space. And Jones doesn't run like a freshman. He runs with a lot of power. There was a practice earlier this preseason where he broke off a run of 70-plus yards. So you got to get your best players on the field, and sometimes that means figuring out how to utilize your freshmen too.
Phil Longo, it doesn't seem like he appreciates being called like air raid, like passing it. He seems to want to remind folks like, no, we run the football in my offense too. Is it just going to look different than we were used to at Wisconsin, right? A very static, very traditional running game. Is there a chance that, like you said, they involve some of these other backs and they utilize like a short passing game to these running backs as almost a supplement? Like they think of that as an extension of their running game.
Yeah, I'd say that's a decent way to put it, Grant. And what you saw last year, it will be similar in terms of philosophy to what you'll see moving forward. They still have a pretty close to a 50-50 run-pass split, even if they're throwing the ball more than we were accustomed to seeing under the previous Wisconsin regimes. But absolutely, the run game is still so important. Some of it is getting it to in a little bit different way. If it means throwing the ball into the flat to a running back to get him out in space, it's kind of like a glorified running play, but they're still going to have lead blockers. They're still going to have multiple running backs, and they're going to try to wear you down just in a different way.
Jesse Temple is here covering the Badgers, Wisconsin football for The Athletic. You and Zach were talking on the camp yesterday about the secondary and how they're getting after the ball. They're ball hawking, not just through interceptions and pass defended, but once a wide receiver has the ball in their hands, punching it out, always going for the ball. And I remember last week I asked you more about the defensive line and the linebacker rotation. Tell me about that back end of the defense, because it sounds like you and Zach, you've been seeing some really promising things from that unit.
Well, I think you can go down the list and say that most positions are better than what they were last season. You could say that for the secondary, too. A lot of these guys were around, but they also had pretty decent success. At cornerback, your top three generally have been Nazir Fortune and Ricardo Hallman on the outside with Max Lopi in the slot. Hallman's numbers last year speak for themselves. He had 7 interceptions. He's obviously back for another season and should be just as good, if not better, although I can't guarantee he'll have 7 picks. I think some teams will see that and maybe go the other direction. But Fortune really has been one of the standouts, and Fickle has said that he probably came as far as anybody when you look at where he was a year ago. He suffered an injury and was battling through some surgeries and came into last season underweight, couldn't really work out with the team. He's gained 20 pounds since then. So that's noticeable. They've got a bunch of talented freshmen and redshirt freshmen in the back end too. And then at safety, you can go with any number of combinations. You still have Hunter Wohler back there. You've got Austin Brown, who I think those guys would be the top 2 safeties if you went into a season, but Preston Zachman and Kamoe Latu are veterans who have been a part of this team for a long time. So I think it's a very talented back end and should be one of the strengths of defense.
Hunter Wohler was very vocal, I remember last year after the Northwestern game, calling out his teammates. He just didn't really seem all that thrilled, and why would he be, about the way that some of those games were going last year and the trajectory of the program. Tell me about Hunter Wohler a little bit as a player and what you've seen, but also as a leader and kind of his role as a leader and as a voice on this team.
Well, it was one of the all-time post-game press conferences that I can remember in my previous 13 seasons at Wisconsin, kind of an all-time excoriation of the program and the team. He just wasn't happy with where things were going. And what really stood out in part was that he was in a position where he could actually say that because he can back it up and he can do it on the field. He had a great season and obviously he's back for another one. But his big thing, and he talked about this in the spring, was being a guy that can be the playmaker that is the Sports Center top 10 highlight where people are looking around going, oh, where did he come from? Which means you go beyond doing your job and you're the guy that is the difference maker defensively. So I've seen a lot of that this fall. I think he's going to have another fantastic season, and I would expect him to be an NFL player. But this program means a lot to him. He's a Wisconsin native who grew up watching this team have so much success. They've not had very much success consistently for the last few seasons. So he's one of those guys who wants to put the program back on the right path.
Yeah, they've been trending in the wrong direction. It's not like they've completely bottomed out and nosedived in his time here. They just haven't been the program that he probably wanted to be a part of right when he first got here. And they did fire a coach. Like, that's not insignificant. When I say they haven't bottomed out, yeah, they haven't been, a 2 or a 3 game winner on their conference schedule, but firing a coach isn't insignificant. Jesse, I want to ask you about your latest story about a week by week kind of rundown of the Big Ten conference schedule this fall. But before, I want you to humor me. This is a bit of a sports radio question. And I think you and Zach would both roll your eyes at how I'm going to frame this, but I think it's a topic that you will enjoy no matter how we attack it. The Alabama game is a month away. Is that game a must win? Like the stakes, what the Badgers could gain from winning that game, starting and going into their conference season. Like, do you just have that game circled 3 or 4 times over as a game that would be absolutely huge for this program to win?
Well, those are different questions, Grant.
Yep.
It's absolutely not a must-win. It's
Right.
a non-conference game against a top 10 team. Even if it's at home, I don't know that a lot of people think Wisconsin's going to win that game. You might have some picking the Badgers to secure that one in an upset. But if they show progress, if they're competitive, if it allows them to build confidence to then 2 weeks later after a bye go to USC and win, then I think that's important. So must win? Absolutely not. But it's a massive game for Wisconsin and what it could mean for this program and where Luke Fickell wants to take it. If they win, to me, it completely changes the trajectory of this season and what I think is possible for this team. At this point, I feel like Wisconsin could be a 7-5, 8-4 team. I think those are the records you would have most fans saying as a prediction.
Mhm.
But you win that game, you're all of a sudden go from being an unranked team to being nationally ranked, and you feel like the ceiling is much higher for this program. So there's absolutely a lot on the line in that game. You don't get very many opportunities like that to have an Alabama come to Camp Randall. It's a non-conference top 10 opponent. But if you lose, it doesn't mean your season is wrecked or the path Fickell wants to take is wrecked. It just shows that it's going to take a little bit longer.
What did you think? I didn't expect Wisconsin to be in the top 25. I can't imagine most did, but what were your first reactions, Wisconsin or otherwise, when the top 25 came out earlier this week?
Zero surprise whatsoever that they're unranked. What's crazy to me is it's the first time they've gone into a season unranked in the AP top 25 since 2016.
Yeah.
Obviously, that season turned out pretty well for the Badgers, and I think these guys, and Hunter Wohler talked to me about this week as well, like you'd rather be not really considered and instead of everyone thinking you're going to be great because you have a chip on your shoulder and you can go and surprise some people. But a lot of the preseason top 25 is about the perception of the team, what you've seen of them in the past, what you think they're going to be. Nobody has any freaking clue, Grant. I mean, They think they know what this team is, and obviously they're coming off back-to-back 7-6 seasons. I think they're undeniably more talented than they were last year. But if you're just picking top 25 teams to start the season, it's no surprise that they're not ranked. Beyond that, Big Ten's really good, man. This is a very difficult schedule for Wisconsin. You throw in the Alabama game. You got Penn State and Oregon at home. Iowa's ranked, so it's not going to be easy by any stretch.
Well, in 2016, that season started not that dissimilar from the way this one is going to start. That was the year they opened with LSU. That I wouldn't say that it was an amazing football game. I guess it depends on what kind of football you like. It was clunky and it was a slugfest, but the Badgers won, and I remember that game as a classic, and Dakota Dixon with the interception at the end. They're not playing LSU this year. They have Bama, but it feels not that dissimilar, a chance to prove themselves and to prove the rankings wrong really early. Jesse, before I let you go, you have a new story out at The Athletic about the ultimate week-by-week game plan for the Big Ten schedule this year. Tell me about the process that you went through to put this together and the games that you really like. That had to be fun to do.
I did this with my colleague at The Athletic, Scott Docterman, and we had two rules here. This was the catch, is that question is if you were granted one ticket per week to watch any game featuring a Big Ten team, what would it be and why? But the catch was you can't visit a stadium more than once during the season, and you can't see the same team 2 weeks in a row. And it turned out, well, this was fun. It was a surprisingly difficult challenge because like week 2, Texas plays at Michigan. It's a top 10 matchup. I would love to see it, but I didn't want to burn my one opportunity to go to Michigan Stadium in week 2 when there were going to be some bad weeks in the Big Ten later in the season, so I saved it. Ultimately, you could go any number of directions. I ended up picking for the visit to Camp Randall to be later in the season. I think it was the Oregon game, which is probably the best team Wisconsin will play this season. But it's a lot of fun, and it really shows that, if you're a Big Ten fan, there's so many opportunities to see some great games. Northwestern's playing its games, some of these visits games at Wrigley Field. Now you've got these 4 teams coming from the Pac-12. So it's going to be a very entertaining season, that's for sure.
I just think this season is going to be better for folks like me who maybe don't intimately know all the recruits and all the players. Like, I want to sit down on Saturday, turn on my TV and go, okay, so what's on? Like, what's the best thing that's on? And in the past, it's like, well, I could watch Ohio State, Maryland. There's just going to be better games because of the expanded Big Ten throughout the fall. And that'll be, I think, I don't want to say that I'm a casual college football fan, but when my team's not on, I kind of just want to be entertained. The matchup should be a little bit more conducive for that kind of viewership, and I think it'll be fun. Jesse Temple, appreciate you. We'll talk with you on Bill's show tomorrow. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Grant.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Last couple of minutes. Appreciate Jesse Temple. How great is he? How lucky are we to have both Jesse and Zach as regular contributors to the show? I'm looking forward to the beginning of Temple and Heilbronn, although we do have camp. Listen to camp on my drive in this morning. Zach and Jesse bringing you updates from practice and things that they're seeing, update by update, little by little, not that dissimilar to active training camp or any other team. Spring training, for example, we just learn a little bit more every day, and we start to really get a good idea of what this team is going to look like and what kind of season they're about to have. It is pretty exciting to look week by week at the college football schedule this fall. And I'm someone that needs a little juice for college football. I am not Zach. I am not Jesse. I am no Ben Kenny. I do not wake up on Saturdays looking to spend my entire Saturday in front of the TV. Now, if there's good college football, I will. And this fall, it's like, oh, excuse me, Penn State's playing who? Oregon's playing who? USC is where? It's just going to be every weekend this fall, and I'm really excited. Brewers lineup is out. Game 3 against the Dodgers tonight. I can give it to you. Last night, we watched Tyler Black hit cleanup. That didn't go so great. So naturally, we said, why not move him up to 3? I'm poking fun. It's probably fine. Terang, Churio, Black, Contreras, Adames, Bowers, Mitchell, Frelick, Ortiz, Frankie Montas on the bump. 4-inning Frankie. I just wonder how long we can do the Terang thing at leadoff when he's playing like this. Like, yeah, when he gets on base, he's great. He's a terror. He can steal and he can do all the things. But like the same can be said for Pete Crow Armstrong. But like if you never get on base and if you're never hitting and you're never producing, I don't know. It's ultimately going to come down to Contreras and Adames. And Probably Churio, who's 20, and that seems a little messed up. It's like, well, as long as our 20-year-old does his job, we should have a shot to win tonight. Oh, man. Number 3, the Dodgers are throwing Walker Buehler, so we have that to look forward to. It seems like jumping out to an early lead might be just what the doctor ordered. Like, we get a little bit of that? We get into the second and the third inning, and it's still scoreless. I'm like, it's only a matter of time before some member of this Brewers lineup tees off. Clemhead Mike texts in 608-321-1670, Coyote Mike, and GWP Dad as well. GWP Dad. Talking about hamstrings. We talked about hamstrings a lot tonight, and probing and prodding of prospects and recruits. We're all over it. J.A. Krebs, some really good takes about Brewers and their situation tonight, and I appreciate the text. J. Krebs, he says, wait a second, we don't think Colin Ray is a 1, but he is our 1. There's a difference. That is an important difference. Like, we're not saying Colin Ray is an ace, but he's our ace. It's not different from the wide receiver conversation that we were having, right? What makes a number 1 wide receiver? Well, the number 1 guy has to be good, but the number 1 designation is also contingent on how good the other guys are. And, in the case of Devontae Adams in 2020, 2021, well, his competition was Alan Lazard and Malik Taylor and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I guess, in 20, not in 2021. Like, Devontae Adams is incredible, and also there was no one else on the team. Like, there are other teams in football right now, and I'm trying to think of a good example. Tyreek's a clear number 1, but he's got Jalen Waddle next to him. And I think Jamar Chase is a clear number 1, but T. Higgins is really good. He's next to him. I'm trying to think of a team like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Now, Cooper Kupp 2 years ago was a clear number 1, basically in Eddie setting, but now a little bit banged up. A couple years later, like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, is there a number 1 there? No, they're pretty close. They're pretty comparable, I think, at least if Puka Nacua turns out to be the player that we saw him be in year 1, for example. So that's just something to consider. And it's the same with Colin Ray. Like, yeah, Colin Ray's probably not a number 1, but look at the other guys in this rotation. Someone's got to be number 1. Ray Peralta certainly doesn't seem interested in grabbing that title, so I guess it's Colin Ray, who gave up 4 home runs last night. Brewers Dodgers, game 3 of the series. Luckily, if they lose tonight, there's another game. 4-inning Frankie Montas on the bump tonight, getting started. We'll see. Enjoy the Brewer game tonight. Try your best. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Thanks for listening always.